The people of Boston really know how to throw a party. Just check out Union Street on St. Patty's Day or the Esplanade on the 4th of July. But the best party they ever threw was the world-famous Tea Party at Griffin's Wharf. It is often portrayed as an anti-tax revolt, but the real grievances that the colonists had with Parliament was that they were being taxed without representation, in violation of the British Constitution, and they were being forced to buy tea from a single source. If you ask most people whose tea was dumped in the harbor, they'll tell you it was British tea. But the tea didn't belong to the British people or the British government. It belonged to the East India Company. And the colonists had a bone to pick with them as well. So the real Boston Tea Party was an anti-corporate revolt. The British East India Company was created in 1600 specifically to monopolize the spice trade. In 1757, the East India Company Army, that's right, they had their own army, gained total control of the Bengal region of India and instituted a harsh taxing policy on the farmers, who were forced to grow mainly cash crops, including indigo, opium, and tea. Seeking higher short-term profits, the company escalated the taxes from 10 to 50% of the yield and refused to let the people store their grains. So, they were dependent on the company for food. Within 10 years, the normal cycle of droughts and the lack of stored grains caused a famine that killed 10 million people, which was 1/3 of the population of Bengal and more than 3 times the population of the American colonies. This gross mismanagement caused a huge financial loss for the company, and they lobbied Parliament to bail them out. Since the King and many of the members of Parliament were stockholders, the government deemed them too big to fail. Does any of this sound familiar? Parliament repealed the taxes laid on the tea in England to undercut the price of Dutch tea, but kept the unconstitutional taxes laid on the Americans. They also gave a tea monopoly to all the colonial ports to the East India Company. The Americans were afraid that the monopoly would soon extend to all other commodities, which is why they refused to allow the tea to be landed and brewed the tea in the harbor instead. The East India Company's cycle of corporate mismanagement and famines would continue for another 100 years until the British government finally stepped in and took over the affairs of India for the repeatedly bailed out and finally bankrupt company. Corporations are dependent on government, not only for their existence, but for grants and contracts, bailouts, diplomacy, and military adventurism. Our government has backed or bailed out automakers, banks, chemical and electronics firms, fruit companies, insurers, giant oil, pharmaceutical companies, and hundreds of railroads since back in the 1800s. When corporations fail, the people pay the price, and government has to bail them out or clean up their messes, from hundreds of Superfund sites to a growing number of paid pension funds. This is why it is necessary for government to regulate commerce and always be more powerful than their dependents. Corporations are efficient at generating short-term profits for a few people, but they are horrendous at regulating economies and the long-term needs of society. Government is a necessary evil because it is the intermediary of so many competing interests. But like any organization, it must ultimately serve the interests of the shareholders, and we, the people of the United States, are those shareholders. And the time has come to rise up and reclaim our ship of state and toss those mutinous corporations overboard.